All right, live from the Big Tomato. It's your boy Toke. Uh, we got a new co-host, Jeff. What's up?
What's up, man? Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, dude. I think I mean, let's just kind of jump into it. The Kings trading De'Aaron Fox was so bad that I actually brought the podcast back. And I want to be clear for anyone who's listening to this, like the reason the podcast is coming back is because I've yet to hear anyone publicly have the right take on what happened. And until we actually get to the root cause of what's going on, they're never going to get better. It's just going to keep being what it's been for the last 20 years. So Jeff, I mean, look, before I go on this massive tirade, why don't we just, get your thoughts?
I mean, listen, the fact that we finally got Taiki back involved in the Kings after what was it, took a 4-year hiatus, uh,
Yeah,
and
man.
and the uh, and we were so close to getting a Kings pod going. I think we started talking about doing this Kings pod before the Fox trade. Like things were going decently well. We're like, oh, maybe we should get a Kings pod going again. And
Yeah.
then and then the Fox trade happens. It's like, okay, now we have to get a Kings pod going for all the wrong reasons. Just sad, man. I mean, this stuff, you know, the Kings are always going to be the Kings, right? Or that's what it seems like. The dysfunction is just it's top to bottom. It's really crazy if you think about it. Obviously, the trade itself, we're not happy with it as Kings fans. I think there's a couple different routes that I want to go with it in terms of, how we got here to the Fox trade, but also, what re-signing Fox would have looked like and all that good stuff. Um, but the Kings are doing Kings things, especially after the De'Aaron Fox call that we heard, earlier today with Carmichael Dave and Damian Barling talking about it.
Yeah.
Apparently he called those guys and had a conversation. It's like that's brought some new information to light.
Uh-huh.
So,
Uh-huh.
so I don't know if you want to jump into your take or if you want me to kind of head down one of those roads, whatever you want.
Okay. Well, let me kind of say a couple things. What's going on with the De'Aaron Fox thing and the way that he decided to go to San Antonio and all that is kind of one of the reasons I stopped watching the NBA. Is the NBA has turned into this thing where it's kind of a racket for these jocks to just, you know, get paid a lot of money and do whatever they want. Like there's kind of no honor or loyalty. And I understand kind of the idea that, well, the teams don't have loyalty because they'll trade you. So why should you have loyalty to them? You should look out for yourself. Here's the thing though. De'Aaron Fox signed a contract. He signed a contract to play basketball for the Sacramento Kings. And he's bound to this contract in exchange for millions of dollars. So for him to say, my time in Sacramento is done while he's still under contract is what annoys me. And I think what initially set things off for me and why like King's Pod kind of initially died, and I said it, I think in one of the last episodes, was the James Harden trade from where was he? From Houston to Brooklyn? Was that what it was?
Yeah, I think so.
Hold on a sec. Um, let me see here. Okay, yeah, we're still recording. Good. Sorry. Growing pains, folks. Without George, I'm still learning. And I was just like, so what is this exactly now? James Harden gets to just like say, "Hey, I signed a contract to play for you, but like, you know what? A couple of my boys are over there. So could you just like facilitate that?" And then the teams do it. It's like, wait a minute. What's the point of the contract then? Like
Yeah, I
that's the
mean,
part I don't understand.
so here's the deal. I think the problem that we have is that the teams do it. Again, I
Yes.
think I think that these guys can say whatever they want, right? Like if I am one of these players, I'm going to do probably the same thing. I'm going to be like, this is where I want to go, and I'm going to try to make sure that I can set things up for myself as best as I possibly can. But
Right.
it comes down to the front office being like, absolutely not. You're under contract, and you go where we tell you you're going to go, and we're going to get the absolute best deal for you. And
Yep.
that's clearly, in my opinion, not what happened with the Fox trade,
Right.
right? And I think,
Right.
and again, I think there's way more to that after that call with Carmichael did. There's a lot more to that Fox trade deal. I don't see Fox as so much of a snake in the grass as I did before I heard those details. But listen, he heard, the organization made it clear to him that they were not going to keep him around, or at least they didn't care about his opinion. Which, if you
Hmm.
say that to your number one player, then you might as well tell him you're not going to keep him around.
Hmm.
Um, and so at that point, he was like, "All right, if you're not going to keep me around, then I'm going to go try to get to where I want to go." And it's up to our front office to be like, "Absolutely not." And that's not what they did. They for some reason, and I can't figure out why, they
I
basically
can.
facilitated it. Okay, tell me why.
Because they're a bunch of nerds and losers. They're not like, oh boy, how do I want to say this for public consumption? They're not alpha males, okay? They're not someone that's going to bang their fist on the table and be like, no, screw you. I'm not doing this deal and get up and walk out.
Okay,
Like, that's it. Like, look at how Pat Riley handled the Jimmy Butler situation and contrast that with what the Kings did. Pat Riley's like, no, 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 like, this isn't how this is going to work. I'm the boss here, and you're going to be a professional. And when you're not being a professional, we're going to fine you, and then we're going to
right.
trade you. We're going to terminate this relationship on our terms. We're
And
not
we're
going
going to suspend
to,
you indefinitely.
yeah, like, we're not going to allow you, who is under contract with us, to dictate things. I think they
Right.
ended up trading him to one of his preferred destinations. But here's the thing. He gave them a list of like five places, and there was a marketplace created. He didn't pick a team and say, you need to trade me to that team, taking away any type of leverage. Let me take a step back, though, before I really get into that. So that's my answer to what the problem is and why the Kings couldn't say no to De'Aaron Fox is because Monty and Wes, they're just, I doubt those guys have ever like walked into a car dealership and negotiated a great deal for a car based on what I've
Right.
seen.
Right.
Um, so there's two kind of predominant takes that I'm hearing from different people. The first take is the Kings front office did not do enough to placate Fox. This was a slow motion train wreck for a long time. They had every opportunity to placate the star and keep him here because he wanted to be here. And they
Okay.
didn't. So how can you blame Fox for wanting to, go to somewhere that's not dysfunctional? Okay, that's one take. The other take is, man, Fox ain't it. He ain't him. So like, you know what? I'm glad he's gone. And I'm just that's what they could get for him. So it's all good. They're both wrong. Like both of these takes are just terrible takes. But what's sad is like they both have a kernel of truth in them. It's just like
Yeah.
they're both missing the bigger picture. So like let me kind of put things in a proper perspective. And people are gonna say, oh, it's a players league, it's a I don't understand the way things really work with agents, and I don't understand the way. Yeah, but I understand the way business works, and I understand the way deals work, and I understand the way leverage works, and I understand basic human psychology. Like that's the other thing. So for
Right.
people who think that the Kings had no leverage in this situation, like I just have to discard your position entirely because you don't understand anything about like you would fold on everything if you were playing poker. The Kings had a contract with De'Aaron Fox for the next year and a half. That's a
Right.
lot of leverage. It wasn't even an expiring contract. That's functionally two playoffs.
Right.
Number one. Number two, the deal that they ended up making, they could have made without San Antonio being involved. They could have traded Fox straight up for Zach LaVine if that's what they want to do. Chicago has been trying to move off of that contract. They've been trying to give Zach LaVine away for free.
Right.
So
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
there are three parties here: De'Aaron Fox, the Spurs, and the Kings. Really, you only need two of these parties to agree on anything: the Spurs and the Kings. But Fox, through his agents, trying to use leverage to do like what he wants. Okay, so Fox got what he wanted. The Spurs got what they wanted, but the Kings didn't
The,
get anything.
I was gonna say
So
the Spurs got more than they could ever imagine, dude. They got De'Aaron Fox for a bag of chips, for God's sakes. They didn't have to give up a single player, and they gave up all their terrible draft
right,
picks.
right. And so now, like, we're going back now to a week ago before this trade happened, and like San Antonio starts saying things like Stephon Castle's untouchable. None of the Atlanta picks that were unprotected were included. The Kings functionally traded De'Aaron Fox for 2027 first rounder from San Antonio, which will probably be like the 30th pick in the draft, and
Right.
then a Minnesota pick in 2031 in 6 years.
Which
Like
I believe is
everything
also
else,
protected, correct?
I don't think that one's protected, but it's in 6 years, so who cares?
Right. There, it's gonna be a
Like
totally
that's
different team
it's
in that room.
irrelevant. It's irrelevant. 6 years from now is irrelevant.
Right.
You don't know freaking what's going to be going on in the world like in six
Right.
years, right?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so and then a bunch of second round picks which are worthless, like just nothing. That's nothing. So you didn't get any of their Atlanta picks. You didn't get any of their young players. You didn't even get Chris Paul, like which. So now you don't have a point guard.
Right.
Uh, and you didn't even get your trade swap back from the DeMar DeRozan Harrison Barnes deal.
Right.
So it's like, okay, why are you the only one in the like why are you the sucker in this situation? Like that's a question you need to ask yourself. Now, one possibility is they just coveted Zach LaVine that much. At which point they
Which
all
I
need to
can't believe.
they
Which I
they,
can't
they all
believe
need to
is
be
true
fired if that's the
because,
case. They
but I can't believe that would be true
everyone.
because if that's true, they could have gotten him for so much less. If that's true, they could have gotten him earlier in the year for so much less.
Right. Well, yeah.
So, like again, they didn't have to do what they did to get him.
Then using the second round picks to get Valanciunas, again, like if you think that this is some sort of like big move that's going to help your franchise, like you should just be fired. We should just like you're gone. Like I'm not even gonna dignify analysis there. Like they just like
Yeah,
okay, if
I
that's
don't think. Well,
whatever.
I don't think you
Okay.
have to. I don't think they made those moves because they're like, oh man, this is going to make us so much better than we were 2 weeks ago. It's like, no, that's obviously not what happened.
So let's run through like, I don't know if you took game theory in college or whatever. I took some game
Mm-hmm.
theory classes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's just kind of do this like prisoner's dilemma type of thing. The best outcome for everyone would have been for the Kings to threaten to not make the trade and actually get something from San Antonio.
Right.
And the counter to that's, well, you're running the risk if you do the nuclear option of getting nothing for Fox. To which point I would counter,
You
yeah,
can still trade him over the summer. You might get nothing for Fox this trade deadline, and he continues to play for the Kings, and maybe we make
right.
the playoffs or we don't or whatever. And then you can trade him over the summer. There's not so much significantly less leverage over the summer than there is right now.
Well, there's a little less leverage because you're talking about 1 year versus a year and a half. You're
Understood, but
talking
it's
about,
but it's not like
but
he's going to walk for nothing. Like you're going to be able to trade him.
I mean, I would have
Are you
thrown.
gonna get so much less than you got right now? Like, are you gonna be able to
I'm.
get? Are you not gonna be able to get Zach LaVine over the summer?
It's pretty simple. Pick up the phone, call Rich Paul, be like, "Hey, look, man. Like, you need to tell San Antonio to quit messing around. They need to give us something. Like, okay, you got the two Atlanta picks, you got Stephon Castle, you got Devin Vassell. Obviously, we want all four of them. Like, that's probably not realistic. They want to give us nothing. That's also not realistic. So let's come to some combination, like two out of those four. Let's, just so we
Right.
can, like, let's make this happen. Otherwise, we might just mess around and trade you to Washington for Kuzma and Valanciunas.
The
Like,
problem is
you
that
you could
again
do that.
in that conversation, you have an A tier organization in the Spurs
Hmm.
negotiating with a G League tier organization in the Sacramento Kings. So you basically, like to your point
Right.
where Pat Riley's that guy who pounds his fist and is like, absolutely not. I'm not going to put up with this. You know, you can stay here and be suspended for the rest of the season for all I care. That's who you're dealing with this in the Spurs, and
Right.
we're calling and being like, we're basically begging for God's sakes.
We're
Um,
begging for
so
them to take our player and give us nothing. It's the Michael Corleone.
essentially,
Here's my offer. Nothing.
I
Like
was gonna say
that's basically what happened.
that's what I'm saying is like I have a feeling they basically were like the Spurs were like, this is what we'll give you, and we're not going to give you a cent more or a player more. And
Okay.
we're like, they gave us the take it or leave it option, and we got so scared that we're like, I guess we'll take it.
But,
It's
but like that, that's the thing. It's like you could not like they offer. Okay, there's no way the offer could have gotten worse. There literally is no way. Like Zach LaVine is not an asset. He's someone that the Bulls were trying to get rid of. They were offering teams a first round pick to take on the contract. So you're worried maybe because the rumor is Vivek was into Zach LaVine, and the Warriors were pursuing that maybe, and like, oh, if you didn't move now, then maybe he goes to the Warriors and you can't get him in the summer. Whatever. Like I'm not even gonna, okay.
I was gonna say,
Zach LaVine's not. He ain't. He's not the guy He's not De'Aaron. Well, there's another conversation about De'Aaron Fox, which is De'Aaron Fox is not the guy either, but like at
right,
least
and
he's
so
a
that's
point guard.
well,
Like,
and so again, that's the other avenue that I wanted to go down, where it's like I
yeah,
think on one hand the Kings got fleeced, and I think
oh
our
yeah,
front office is totally inept. On the
right.
other hand, uh, I think it might be a godsend that we got rid of the Aaron Fox, not in the way that we did, but that we got rid of him because we were going to have to give the Aaron Fox max money,
Hmm.
which means he's locked in to be our 1A, and he's not a 1A guy. He's a 1B
No,
guy.
I don't think he's
Frankly,
even a 1B. He's a 2.
well, listen. I think he's going to do awesome in San Antonio. I
Hmm.
think San Antonio is the exact opposite of what Sacramento is. Their
Hmm.
stability, and he has absolutely no expectation that he's going to be the number one guy. Like it's not even a question. When he walks
Hmm.
into the locker room, there's already a number one guy there. No one's like, oh, maybe De'Aaron can become that guy. It's not even a question. On the
Right,
Sacramento Kings, he walked in the building and everyone was looking at him like he's the number one guy, and even he knew he wasn't the number one guy. It
right,
just it wasn't his role on our team, and we tried to force that role. So paying that guy long term, I don't think makes any sense for Sacramento. Now, obviously, we would need a good front office to be able to pull off a trade that could net us
right.
something where we could potentially replace him, and that didn't come through. But I think the baseline of paying Fox long term is not the right move because again, and you probably can tell me better than I can. What's the path for us to find a 1A if we re-sign him? What's the path to bring someone in who's
Um,
better than Fox? We re-sign him this year or last year. He signs the contract last year. We re-sign him to a max deal. What's our path to finding the guy that dwarfs him and is like, okay, we finally found our new number one, and Fox can take his rightful spot, on
okay,
the second tier.
okay. I mean, that's like a pretty easy answer, right? Like, you need two things, but you need an organization that's not staffed by losers. And like that's one thing that I've kind of come to realize, and I'm going to divert a little bit just because I want to give the fans, a little something here. After stepping away from the Kings for 3 years, and then slowly, like at the beginning of last season, kind of coming back and like reassessing things almost with like brand new eyes. I just realized the Kings have this losers mentality. The Spurs,
You didn't know that
the
before?
no, I mean I knew it, but like it just it's like it's in everything. It's like a pickle, okay? Like you could take the pickles out of the burger, but it still leaves that residue. It's just anything it touches, it just has that
Right,
kind of smell and that taste. Like
right,
this is what needs to be addressed. Going back to the negotiation thing, the Kings took an L on the trade because it like without even trying to put up a fight to not take the L. Like they just said, okay, fine, go to where you want to go. We'll take nothing,
right,
whatever.
right.
Um, I came back into this team. I see Mike Brown's a coach. Never a fan of Mike Brown, by the way. Cleveland, LA, wherever he's been, he's just been like a
Sure.
very unimpressive head coach, in my opinion. And then I see this guy Monty walking around in his vest, and I'm just
You
gonna,
love the best.
as a side note, like dress like a man. Don't dress like a grown child. Like that's you're not a serious I don't I don't take people seriously that dress like that. But that's whatever. Um, And all I heard was like, oh yeah, like this Monty guy, he's a winner. He's way better than Vladdy. Like the Kings are not that team anymore. They're actually good. Like Fox is good. And I remember, Fox from back in like the 2019, 2020 days. And it's like, yeah, he was always a nice player. And I was like, oh,
Yeah, dude, Fox is good. There's no question.
Maybe Fox like developed into that guy. Okay, so I watched. I saw a lot of that at the beginning of the last season. I was like, yeah, this guy might be like that guy. I don't know. And then he had this like weird January last year where he didn't talk to the media for like 3 weeks and his numbers dropped off and something funky was going on there. And kind of looking back now on things, I think that something was going on. But
Well,
at the
apparently, so he addressed that in his call with I think it was Damian
with
Barling.
Dave,
He basically
okay,
no Damian Barling. He said that that's one of the reasons that he was getting pissed at the Kings because I guess they were. This is according to him, and you got to decide if you want to believe him or not. But
uh-huh,
he was saying that they don't get to decide when they go up to the media. It's the Kings that decide when they go up to the media. The Kings go tap them on the shoulder and say, "Hey, you got media today."
okay,
And
all
he's
right.
like, and I just wasn't getting the tap. And so whether that's because something was going
Mm,
on and they didn't want Fox's bad attitude up there, or like whatever the reason is, that is what he said. And he said again, just like with the Mike Brown firing, he said that the Kings left him hanging out to dry. Like the Kings
okay.
left him hanging out there. Like no one came out and was like, "Hey, we're telling De'Aaron not to do media today." Everyone's just like, "Oh yeah, it is what it is."
Well, okay, so I will put a pin in the Damian Barley and Carmichael Dave thing because we will get to that, but I just want to kind of go through the timeline chronologically. I think
Sure.
I'll say right off the bat, I kind of don't buy that. I buy his comments about Mike Brown, but I kind of don't buy the media stuff. But anyway, so I'm watching the team last year, and it's clear like, okay, this is like a good team. Like they're not like the
Yeah.
Kings teams with DeMarcus Cousins. Like it's a good team, but they're limited.
Right.
Like how do they make that next step? My thought at the time was, one of the problems the Kings have is they're too dependent on perimeter, like on perimeter scoring. They don't
Okay.
really have a low post player, and they don't ever really shoot mid-range jumpers, which is like a whole nother NBA story. But like, the Kings
Right.
don't have anyone other than really Fox who operates in the mid-range. So kind of
Right.
bringing on DeMar DeRozan and only giving up Harrison Barnes to make that happen seemed like, oh, okay, like this team's gonna level up. Like
Right.
they're gonna level up. Um, but they still had holes, and you're still kind of looking at them like, yeah, probably like a second round exit's like where this team is. So the season starts. Obviously it's well documented how poorly the season started and they ended up firing Mike Brown, but
Right.
sometime around December there's just a recalibration that went off in my mind. And I think you remember at the time I said, I think we've miscalculated how good De'Aaron Fox is, because if Fox was as good as we thought he was, this team would be good enough as it's constructed to be a 5 seed,
Right.
but they're the 12 seed.
Right.
So, like, maybe Fox isn't as good as we thought he was. So, here's the deal: as a front office, you should be like an intelligence agency. You need to have an information gap with the rest of the league when it's in regards to your players. So, there should have been a calculation here like, dude, Fox is actually not as good as we thought he was, because if he was, this team wouldn't be in 12th place. He's not committing to us long term.
Right.
All the other stuff that Fox kind of addressed, now we know kind of even further is like my analysis here.
Right.
That was the time, in a preemptive manner, before you get agents involved and before you start having like things out there about preferred destination. That's a time where you get your best offer for the guy and you move on. What the Kings opted to do, though, instead, was kick the can down the road, fire the coach, let him be the fall guy, and then they kind of pinned it
Right.
on Fox. But
100%.
whatever, like that's whatever. And I'll just say, like, regarding what Fox said, and here's where I do disagree with kind of your analysis. the Kings don't owe Fox anything. Like he hasn't earned anything, in my opinion. Yeah, he's the best player on the team, but he's been here for 8 years and they made the playoffs once. They've had or three, two winning seasons. Like you
I
don't,
don't disagree, but
you
I
don't,
don't disagree. But if
we're
that's the
not
case,
talking
then we
about
can't.
even Anthony Davis here.
Right. I don't disagree, but if that's the case, then we can't be pissed when he bails, right? Because like he can't get not get consulted,
Hmm.
and he can't be someone that we covet so much that like when he asks for a trade, we're shocked, and then when we trade him, again, terrible trade, but when we trade him, it's like, oh God, we lost our best player. But also a guy that doesn't get consulted when we're going to make a coaching change. Specifically when he said, "I'm Mike Brown is essentially the last coach I'm going to play for in Sacramento." He said,
Yeah.
he's like, this is the guy that I'm going to play for. Let's get some stability. Let's extend this guy and let's go give it a run. And then the guy goes on a 5-game losing streak in the first year of his new contract, and we fire him. It's like,
You
again, it just
burned
shows the
$25 million. Just you burned it.
right.
You
It's
just set
like,
it on
and,
fire.
and so like again, as much as I don't like how Fox played it in terms of trying to push his way to the Spurs, at that point the Kings had already messed up so bad so many times. What's Fox supposed to think when he goes to the front office as the best player on the team and says, "This is my guy, you got to extend him," and then they fire him? Like, what's he
Hmm.
supposed to think? He's like, "Okay, my time's done here." Like, he doesn't have to make that decision on his own. We made that decision for him.
Okay. So here's what he could have done. He could have said, you know what, guys? I'd like to move on. My preferred destination is San Antonio. However, I understand as an employee of the Sacramento Kings, I shouldn't undermine you in public. So I'm doing this privately. Open it up, get offers, and if the offers are close, please send me to San Antonio. There you go.
I mean,
Now,
what's his incentive to do that?
good faith. I mean,
Again, he doesn't care, dude.
don't tell
He
me.
thinks he thinks the Kings are operating in bad faith. So he's like, "Listen, dude, I'm just trying to get the hell out of here, and if I gotta go, then I'm gonna go to my desired destination." Again, I don't like what he did, but I understand what he did.
Yeah, I mean, look again. De'Aaron Fox has to wear it. Like a lot of the dysfunction and a lot of that stuff, he has to own too. I mean, he was the captain and the best player on the team that was
Yeah,
underperforming. So it's like, look, man, you signed the contract. You took the money. You're making $35 million a year. You don't get to fucking do that. Excuse my language. You don't get to do that to your team in a public way like that. Now, we've decided as a society that players are allowed to do this in the last like 10 years. And this is what I
right.
don't like, right? But it's as a fan of the team, you are putting me in a position where now I have to not like you because what you did was shady and underhanded. And whatever the Kings did,
I don't know if it was
it
shady and
was not
underhanded, dude. Again, again, after that call, like he made it clear exactly what the Kings had to do, and
okay. You want to
what's that?
summarize? You want to summarize? Like, let's get into that now. Go ahead and summarize, like,
Yeah,
what the call was.
yeah, so he had a call. Basically, Damian Barlin was calling him a snake in the grass, and so he was
Hmm.
tweeting back and forth. And eventually, he's decided to jump on a call with him, and he kind of went over a bunch of details. But the main aspects of it were, he never wanted to leave Sacramento. And again, this is him talking, so believe whatever
Hmm.
you want.
Hmm.
But he said he never wanted to leave Sacramento until
Hmm.
the Mike Brown firing. He
Hmm.
didn't want to re-sign that contract because he wanted to be able to get more money on the supermax.
Hmm.
Um, he told the front office that uh, Mike Brown was going to be essentially the last coach that he plays for in Sacramento.
Hmm.
This is when they were considering extending him. It sounds like the front office never wanted to extend Mike Brown, but
Hmm.
Fox essentially convinced him to do so. Convinced him to do so by saying that it was the last coach he was going to play for, and if they ever let him go, then like that was probably going to be his last stint with Sacramento as well. Um, and then he said, when they finally did fire Mike Brown, he was like, then they let me take the fall for it, which is totally true. They didn't come out and do a
Hmm.
press conference. That the national media and some of the local media were talking about how Fox was essentially the reason that Mike Brown got fired, and no one came out to say that wasn't true.
Hmm.
Um, and again, the front office just keeps coming back with, well, we kept offering him a max extension, we kept offering him max money. It's like, dude, that's
Hmm.
not the only thing. There's more to it than that.
Yeah,
And
look,
so
I mean,
and so again, I think it comes back to the fact that it's like Fox feels like he was done dirty by the Kings.
mhm.
And so he definitely pushed his way to where he wanted to be. There's no question about that. But it's like
Yeah, I mean,
The Kings have a history of doing people dirty. It's like it's not like Mike Brown. When Mike Brown got fired, it's not like everybody was calling for Mike Brown's firing for weeks or months or even days. It's
yeah,
like
the
Mike
narrative
Brown got
around
fired
Mike's
out of the
Brown,
blue.
it was kind of like, no, people were like, is he going to lose his job? Is he like, but it was
Yeah,
kind of
dude,
like
but that's because of the
something
dysfunction.
has to
If he was
happen.
working for a normal franchise, that wouldn't happen. Like that's because of the dysfunction. Like that's such a Kings thing. That's not an NBA as a whole thing.
All
You
right,
know, you don't
so
almost
listening,
everybody that gets extended does not get 5 game losing streak and they're like, "Oh, they're going to get fired." That's a Kings thing.
listening to Grant after some of the games, I would say probably about a week and a half before the actual firing, Grant started asking his co-host Ryan the question, you think if Mike Brown didn't just sign an extension, he'd still be the coach? So, I mean, there was, I think, even some hesitancy on the Kings' behalf to fire him. I think what ended up happening was someone had to be the fall guy, and it ended up being Mike Brown. But because the Kings are a dysfunctional organization, they didn't have like a strategy in place for how to navigate it from a narrative standpoint. So they, by default, kind of left the players out to hang. I'm not sure that they were the ones who pinned it on De'Aaron Fox. It was more of a neglect thing than anything.
Yeah,
But
of course they didn't
I,
do it. They did it passively, not actively, but it
yeah,
still
exactly.
happened.
Okay, yeah, and I think that's fair. And I think if that bothered De'Aaron Fox, I think he's absolutely justified in feeling the way he feels about that. But I would say
And
pretty
so,
much
and
everything
again,
else,
what's his option in that situation? Does
trade
he
me.
go up to the mic and right? That's it. So he either says I want to be out of here, or he goes up to the mic and he goes, "Hey,
I
listen,
think,
guys, I had nothing to do with this. The organization is seemingly pinning it on me, and I had nothing to do with it. And you know, if it was me, I'd probably call the GM out. I'd be like, hey. I think we should all hear from the GM on this because I had no idea this was happening. I had nothing to do with the
all right.
conversation. So let's hear from the GM. Because again, you either got to ask out and move on, or try to face it directly and make some change in the organization. And these
Yeah,
NBA
he was
players
past
don't.
that. So look,
Yeah, exactly.
I gotta say this, man. I think he had a foot out already. So like he already, I think, was kind of like, okay, like I don't know. Maybe there's someone somewhere better. And to be honest, like that's a human instinct. Like we would all probably be
I
thinking
mean,
that if
I
we're
don't disagree. I don't
okay.
believe him that he was
l-
not considering leaving before the Mike Brown
So,
firing.
and I think that that is a part of the reason why he wouldn't sign an extension. It was also the supermax thing, but that was probably the primary driver. But there was also
But
this
that
like,
was a Hail Mary.
yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Well, but um, what I was gonna. So, did he never make All NBA? I thought he made the third team one
No,
of those
I
years.
don't think.
Did he?
Maybe he did. I don't think he's ever made it. That's why I said it was a Hail Mary because I'm
Okay.
like the guy's never made it before. He's a one-time All-Star. It's like that's it's not
An injury replacement
right.
All Star, by
It's
the
not
way.
like we got to be realistic.
Um,
And listen, and that's fine because that's 1B stuff right there. That's like a
yeah.
1B resume. That's a second option resume.
Yeah, after 3.5, 4 years of not watching the Kings, when I came back, like my instant thought was, oh, Fox is like a good number two, and Sabonis is like a good number three. But we're
Right.
casting them as a number one and a number two, respectively, because that's what we have. And
Exactly.
at the time, I kind of felt like, okay, well, let's just get the losing stink off this franchise and just like be a winner for a few years and change the culture, and then you'll figure out how you get that 1A down the road, which was kind of one of your initial questions at the start of our call. And so you do it by changing the culture, and then you do it by finding that guy, and you
Yeah,
don't
but
need
by
to
finding that guy,
tank
you
the
mean free agency?
no, I mean by, okay, well, how did Milwaukee find Yanni? How did Denver find Jokic? Those guys were picked outside the lottery. I think Yanni was
Yeah,
a number 15 pick. Jokic was a second rounder. So,
rounder,
like,
yeah.
going back to what I said earlier, you win by winning. You just got to start winning, man. And whenever you do have a draft pick, there's a dope player on the board. Doesn't matter where you are, there's someone there. You just got to find that guy. And by the way, you don't need to find that guy every single time. You just need to do it every third time or every whatever. Like Milwaukee has not had another draft pick as good as Yanni since then, but they got that one. The Spurs,
Right.
they got Tim Duncan in
I don't think that's
1997.
realistic.
Well, look, the Spurs, they got Tim Duncan in 1997. They rode that for 18 years. Then they
Hmm.
sucked for God knows how long. Then they got Wemby. Like, yeah, sure. If
Did
the
they draft
Kings,
Kawhi or did Kawhi get traded there?
no, they drafted him, but
Okay.
they drafted. There's another good example. I think he was like the 12th pick. So it's like
Yeah, dude. But
you
again,
you
that
don't
goes
need
back
to
to being like
tank.
yeah, I understand, but that goes back to being a good organization and a stable organization. So it's like, yes, I agree that obviously if you could find one of those dudes in the draft when you're already a decent squad, of course, like that's the way you want to do it. But we've proven no ability to do that in the past. So like essentially our path to winning as Kings fans is you got to have the team that you already have on the books, and hopefully you're good enough where someone's like, okay, I'll go to Sacramento because they're actually good and like I could potentially win a championship. I
To
think
do
that was
what
like
De'Aaron Fox just did.
right. Essentially, I think we were hoping to get to that point. I think that was where we were like, okay, maybe if we can become a team that's 10 games over 500, one of these major players, one of these 1As will be like, okay, I'm trying to go to Sacramento because I see what they're doing over there. We just
Uh,
never got there.
let me go back to Fox real quick on something because I just want to close the book on this, and I do understand kind of your point about he had no incentive, and that that's fine. But I've frankly never really seen, with maybe the Anthony Davis exception, I've never really seen a guy say I want out and pick the team ahead of time the way that Fox did. Like usually you'll see these guys, like I remember when Chris Paul told New Orleans like, "Hey, I'm done in New Orleans.
Right.
Trade me to New York, LA or Miami." And it's like, "Okay, there's five teams there.
Right.
um Now we have like a market, like these teams, like the picking San Antonio thing is really I think what does it for me because it's like you undercut the, and yeah, okay, he doesn't have an incentive, but it's just so bizarre in the context of like other trades that have happened in NBA history where a guy picks his team while he's already under contract with another team. If you really want
I
San
don't
Antonio to
disagree.
be if you really want San Antonio to be the destination, you can sign there as a free agent. If you
Right.
know, if you want to give the Kings like five teams, or even screw it, three teams. Okay, trade me either San Antonio, Milwaukee, or pick your rank for the Lakers, whatever. Like, okay, the
Right.
Kings could then at that point, like, actually, get a return, get a young player, like he just put them in a position where their only leverage was the nuclear option, which they should have taken, by the way. Because if San Antonio wants, you see, here's the other thing about this too. He picked San Antonio, but did San
Well, I
Antonio
was just
even want him that much? Like that's kind of a question that, like they took him because they didn't give up anything for him. But like, was that
and
a
I was gonna
viable
say,
threat?
well, and this is also something that like again, I don't know what it means, but it's like I can't remember the last time a player was like trade me to a smaller market with a worse record.
Yeah,
It's like the guy so that I can go be I should say I can't remember the last time a number one player on a team was like trade me to a smaller market with a worse record where I will no longer be the number one player.
yeah.
It's like, has that ever happened?
No, it's I'm look, the NBA has been around for like 75 years.
Sure,
Right? Like maybe it's happened, but I'm
not
not
in my recent
I'm not
recollection. It's
I'm
like,
not
oh,
aware.
and that's exactly what I mean when it's like that's just beta activities. Like that's he,
Yeah.
like trade me to a market where I can go hide. I'm not gonna like we all know. and we've said this for years, like this guy will
Hmm.
get eaten up in one of these large markets. Like you put him in New York, you put him in LA, like
Oh
he's gonna
yeah.
get eaten up. He can't
Oh,
handle the press conference after the Detroit loss. Like you think he's gonna go do that in Madison Square Garden? I don't think so, dude.
no.
So he's like,
Thank.
send me to the smallest market you can send me to where I actually
Yeah.
have like somewhat of a decent chance of winning.
So thank you for reminding me. That kind of brings up something. And like this was more something I wanted to say before we traded him to convince the folks that were like, "Oh my God, we messed it up with Fox, and like now we're going to be in mediocrity because he was so great." Fox's rookie year, if you remember correctly, I think it was like Jaeger's last year with the team. They ended up winning 39 games. And this kind
Okay.
of jumps out at me now in retrospect. They had 39 wins with 3 games left in the season. And at this point, the Kings had not had a winning season, I think, in 14 years. And
Jeez.
then, they had the opportunity to break that. Like, they could get to 42. They could have a winning season. Yeah, they weren't going to make the playoffs. And they proceeded to lose the last 3 games of that season. And De'Aaron Fox was doing like a Twitch stream or something online. I don't remember the details. And someone kind of like was like, "Dude, why didn't you guys try to like go for it?" And he's like, "Man, those games don't mean anything. Like, who cares?"
Right. Yeah.
And it's
And
like,
that's exactly
that
what
was
else do you
your
need to know about
answer.
the
His
attitude? Yeah.
as a rookie, that was it. Like that should have told you, like, okay, this guy might be a dope player, but he's not going to be the guy,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I did
Yeah. And
not
again, so
watch a
go ahead.
single game with Tyrese Halliburton on the team. I did not watch a single game. So I have like absolutely no opinion. But the narrative around it is that Fox forced him out. Now, you got
I
Sabonis
don't know.
for it, but
I would say I don't know if Fox forced him out, but yeah, I don't think they were filling the same role on the
no,
team,
they were
and
saying that
not
he was being moody and like he was kind of like I don't know if we could play together behind the scenes or there's murmurs of that. I don't know things
right.
directly,
Fair
so
enough.
maybe I shouldn't speculate, but I will because whatever. There hasn't been good faith on any side anywhere here. So, you
Right.
know what? I'm just gonna, I heard this,
Let it
take it with a
fly. Let
grain of
it
salt.
fly.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so he showed you his rookie year, his attitude. And then I
Yeah.
remember last year when he got quote unquote snubbed from the All Star game, which probably he was snubbed, to be frank. I mean, he was like number 5 in scoring, and he was like the only guy in the top 20 in scoring who didn't make the team. And he was 5, he
Right.
wasn't 19.
Yeah.
Um, he was like, "Yeah, man, I didn't care about that. I didn't care." It's like, dude, look, I don't. I get it, like in a certain respect that you don't care, but it's also kind of not the psychological profile of a winner.
I'm sure he does care, and he was just saying that because he's not trying to,
Dude,
look soft or
he
whatever. But it's like, dude,
actually
it makes you look even more soft.
he actually might not care though. That's the thing. Like that, honestly, that's the thing. And whatever. I mean, he's gone. Um, yeah, I mean, anything else on the Damian Barlin and Carmichael Dave call that you wanted to address?
Oh, there was one other thing, which I just heard right before we jumped on here.
Yeah.
Apparently, midway through the beginning of the season,
Huh.
um, Vivek or Monty went to Mike Brown and was like, "Hey, you got to fire one of two people on the coaching staff." Basically, there was beef on the coaching staff,
Okay.
um, and you got to fire one of two of those guys. Uh, and obviously, it didn't happen, and it was Doug Christie was not one of the two guys.
Right.
But again, so I think the whole
It was
point is that
probably
like
the number 2 guy and the number 3 guy, which is why they were passed up for Doug
for
Christie.
sure, of course, yeah, it's like it's
So,
obvious.
okay, right?
Right. And so, yeah, of course. And so it's like, you know, again, I think it just goes back to that dysfunction. And you know, Mike Brown wanted to be a defensive guy. That was like
Hmm.
his whole thing. That was
Oh,
his whole thing. And
there
so,
was an asymmetry between the coach and the front office.
yeah, dude. And
Like I
so
don't know
again,
why they hired Mike Brown. Like they had no interest
absolutely,
in getting him the
absolutely.
personnel to run his system.
Right, exactly. And so I think that's kind of the main point. And I guess Fox brought that up as well, as he was like, you have Mike Brown who wants to be a defensive guy, and then you have at summer league you got Monty McNair being like, yeah, like we want to improve the defense, but like we got to make sure the offense stays solid. Like like very like blowing off the
Yeah,
defensive aspect of things.
Monty's a loser with a Excel spreadsheet. That's what he is. And
And the best.
if you remember the old podcast with George, we would always talk about the bean counters and the analytics people and the people who like to,
Yeah.
you know, f- play around with the advanced stats and the, win share percentage and the PER and all these stupid weighted nonsense like stuff. And it's not to say that those things cannot the proper context for those things is you're trying to quantify what you're seeing. Like that's how you should operate. You shouldn't and when something seems like an outlier that doesn't make sense, you need to discard it. Right? Like I'm sure
But
that
even
like
even when we brought Monty on, everybody was like, "Oh, this guy's got great analytics." And not only that, he works with the coaches.
mm,
He tries to like make sure that these guys are all in lockstep with each other. Like, "Hey, what do you need? This is what I'm seeing. This is what, you know." And it's like
is
that never happened here.
okay,
that never happened.
So Monty, from what I understand, came from Houston. He was like a Daryl
Yeah,
Morey
he did.
guy.
Yeah.
And then Wes Wilcox, who's the assistant general manager or whatever, however, he's the number two. He came from Atlanta. He was the other person who interviewed. And for some reason, Vivek decided to hire both of them, but, one of them to be the one and one of them to be the two, which, okay, that's just dumb.
Correct.
You should probably let your number one hire. And again, dude, like this is such basic stuff that it's like,
Yeah, dude. You don't hire two
I'm
CEOs.
tired. Like
Like
I'm
someone's
exhausted.
got to make the decisions.
I am exhausted and I'm tired that I even need to say things this basic. Like I feel like a seventh grader would figure this out. But okay, so you do that. Um, like is Houston a team that you want to emulate, like historically? West came from
Right.
Atlanta. What did Atlanta do that it's like, oh yeah, I want to do that here? Like if you're
Right.
gonna hire someone, like here's who I would hire. I'd go to Oklahoma City. I'd be like, whatever Presti or whatever the GM's name is, like I want someone from there because Oklahoma City figures it
Yeah,
out.
they've
They
drafted unbelievably well.
they drafted KD, they drafted Russ, they drafted Harden. Like they hit pick after pick after pick, and
Yep.
then they proceeded to squander that by trading Harden, and then eventually whatever. But like they got the draft thing figured out, and then
Yeah, but
when
I will say this. They had to spend a lot of time in the dumps to get some picks to be able to acquire the picks, which again, dude, at this point, like who cares? We'll spend some time in the dumps as Kings fans. Like we've been in the dumps
um
our whole lives. But they had to spend like I'm talking about the most recent iteration
yeah,
with
look, but they traded,
Shea
but
Gilders at like they had to spend some times as straight up terrible.
But let's break it
But
down though.
look
Here's
where
what
they're
they
at now.
did. So they drafted Sabonis, like number 12 or whatever, which they're
Hmm.
again another, like that's what you can get sometimes, like somewhere in the late lottery, early, mid teens. They
Right.
drafted Sabonis, they turned that into Paul George, and then they turned Paul George into Shea and a shit ton of draft picks.
Right.
Like that's why Oklahoma City is where they are. So get someone from there. Another
Yeah.
franchise that I would look at as like a model, maybe not like, okay, like this is the best franchise in the NBA, but like they're not a laughing stock, would be like the Pacers. The Pacers are always in the
Right.
playoffs. They're always
Yep. They
good.
sure
Like
are.
they always figure it out. And it's like they're one of those franchises that like on any given year they could get lucky and make it to the finals. It hasn't
Right.
happened, but like they're always in the mix. They were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. What's Larry Bird doing over there that's so intelligent?
Right.
Like get
Right.
someone from like these are like you went to basically like you went to Atlanta and to Daryl Morey's GM tree as your hire.
Right.
And these are like
Right.
smart guys because they play with numbers in a spreadsheet. Like, dude, our mutual friend, you know him, Nick.
Yep.
Not a sports guy, not a basketball guy. He can watch like 5 minutes of a game and just be like, "Oh, that's a good player." Like
Right.
like the first time that guy saw Ben McLemore play, he's like, "Where did the Kings get this? Who is this guy?" And like this was at a time when people were like, "Oh, Ben McLemore has potential." And he was like, dude, this guy cannot, like,
I was
he
one of those
sucks.
guys.
You were one of the
Right.
guys who thought he had potential. And Nick
That's right.
like, you need someone who just has an eye for things. Like,
I was
there's
like
no,
future Ray Allen.
yeah, future Ray Allen, because he has like a nice stroke. It doesn't go
Right.
in, but the stroke looks good, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
I don't know, man. Like, I think that it's pretty obvious where the problems are.
Yeah, but
You
so
have an
so I think
owner,
at the end of the day, yeah, go ahead.
who's made one right decision, and then it was the very first decision he made. By the way, he hired Mike Malone. And
Right.
literally every decision since then has just
Yep.
been one mistake after the other, after the other, after the other. He cannot hire anyone. He doesn't have a good organizational structure. His organization doesn't have prestige. It doesn't have class. They do very bizarre things like fire a coach right after he finishes practice. They don't even have the
Yep.
decency to do it like, and it's stuff like that that's like the basics. It's like before the test even begins, can you write your name down? Like that's the level we're talking. The Kings cannot even write their name on their test. Like that's
Right.
how incompetent they are. So,
So I guess the question is, should we sign Doug Christie to a 10-year contract so that we can just be locked in? Not that we wouldn't fire him after 1 year anyways, because that's what Kings do.
well,
But
you know,
but should we sign him to a a 10-year contract just to be
I
like, hey,
think he
you
has.
have such a long runway to figure this out, and like at least we're gonna have some stability. We almost have to overpay our coaches also just to incentivize ourselves not to fire
Hmm.
them.
Hmm. So
But
here's what I would say, man. Like you look at a team like the Utah Jazz back when they had Stockton and Malone, and like
yeah,
they just had Gary Sloan as the coach for like 20 something years. It's like, okay, like they could have been like, oh, we've hit our ceiling with this guy. He's not going to go any forward and fired him. But they didn't do that. And then they ended up making it to the finals back to back years, like, after a
right,
decade. Like
right,
sometimes, it's not the coach. Like sometimes you
yeah,
need better players. So for me, I
right,
never thought Mike Brown was a good coach, but it's like, here's the list of Sacramento Kings coaches who've had winning seasons since they moved here 40 years ago. Rick Adelman, Mike Brown. End of list.
right. That's it.
Like,
That's
so it's
it.
like, okay, I don't even think he's a good coach, but it's like, why are you firing the guy? He's not the problem. The problem is you made a miscalculation on how good your team was. And
Well,
who were you overvaluing? You were primarily overvaluing De'Aaron Fox. That was the
correct.
problem, and that's what should have been addressed. And instead,
Right.
they did like a speed run in how to just nuke a franchise. They fired the coach, destabilizing everything, and then they got rid of the
2 years
player.
from the peak. 2 years from the peak, it's all nuked.
It's dude, it's something
Oh
else.
my god.
Anyway,
But that's what I'm saying. Like you got Pat Riley. You think Pat Riley was considering firing Eric Spoelstra when the Jimmy Butler experiment didn't work out? No, he's like, dude, Jimmy, you're suspended indefinitely till we can find you a home. Like,
right.
and again, I understand Eric Spoelstra won championships with the big three, but it's like they haven't they haven't done a whole lot since. But it's a
Yeah, it's not a
stability
Phil
issue.
Jackson resume. Like it's not
Right,
a
it's a
you know,
stability issue, or like even Pop. Again, I know Pop had his years for sure, but like Pop's teams have been terrible. No one's sitting here being like, "Oh, Pop sucks as a coach." It's like no, like they've had bad players. The GM's trying to find them better players. They just stole our best player. Like the GM's doing his job, and Pop's going to wait around until someone comes and gets on the team that he can work with. Like
right.
that's the stability that I think De'Aaron Fox wanted and that he left the Kings for. And I think that's the stability that all the players that come through the Kings are looking for and why they eventually leave. These guys are all like, dude, this is a joke. Like we're the laughing stock of the league. And so, dude, screw it. Let's sign Doug to a 10-year contract. That's where I'll leave it.
Well, I think for a while there, he had the highest winning percentage of any coach in NBA history who's coached a minimum of 5 games. I think that's changed, though. I don't know if that's still true.
What do you do?
Look,
He's still like what, 12-6, 12-7?
yeah, he's got 12, and they've lost, I think, 7 now. Um, Look, here's just like my take on Doug. I think there's some things about him personally that I'm not really huge on. And I'll just kind of leave it at that for now. But
And
I
pizza
mean,
guy.
he does. Well, let's not get into it. But I do think I do think, to be frank, he is kind of what the Kings need right now. He's kind of like a momentum, like feel good, like we don't take plays off. We don't,
Yeah,
like we're not gonna front and like, stat pat do that. We're gonna like grind. That's what we're gonna do. And that's what the team needs if you're going to turn the culture around. But again, like back to like my big bullet point, you win by winning. They just got to try to win as
yep,
many games as they can. And then you need a competent front office, not anyone who's there right now. Like I would, if
of
you're
course not.
if you're employed, even if you're like the janitor, I would be like, I'm sorry, we're gonna go
We're gonna
like
clean sweep.
they're just,
No pun
and
intended.
bring a priest in there, do some sort of exorcism, like just whatever's going on.
We gotta
It
get some
needs,
sage. We gotta burn some sage in the
we
building.
need to burn
We
some
gotta burn.
sage, and
Yeah, we got.
you need like anyone who's involved in this debacle, because like this is the worst case scenario. Like if you were to come to me December 15th and be like, what is the worst case scenario for the season? Destabilizing the franchise, losing your best player for nothing. Here we are.
Basically,
And
basically.
it's probably even worse than that because you picked up Zach Levine, who's he's a good like look, he's a good
I would say
player.
he's fine. Like we didn't lose him
He
for
would have
nothing,
been
but at the same time, we didn't lose him. We didn't lose him for true value, or I guess maybe we
okay.
overvalued him. Who
Well, let me
knows?
ask you, if you could forget money for now, if you could
Yeah,
trade him for like Atlanta's unprotected or Stefan Castle, and listen, I don't watch San Antonio. I don't know if Stefan Castle's good or not, but people think he's good. Like if you
yeah.
could,
He's. I've seen some highlights. He looks pretty sick.
or even like Devin Vassell, like he's like a competent wing, which is like what the Kings need.
Yeah.
Like I
I
would
mean, again, listen.
trade.
I don't want to overvalue these guys either because again, these guys are on a
They're on a
team
bad
with
team.
a yeah, like they're members of a bad team, and they have a player who's far better than De'Aaron Fox. So like, and
Kevin
their
Martin
record is worse than
effect.
the Kings. Right.
It's a
Like I don't want to make it
yeah,
seem like Castle or Vassell are like our godsends. I think it's disgusting that our front office couldn't convince them to give us their backup point guard. But regardless, the fact is that like if you told me that we would get their unprotected Atlanta pick this year and some other first round picks, I still think you would be pissed because we would be still heading in a direction where it's like we're no longer focused on winning now. We're focused on trying to get the draft,
right.
trying to nail the draft. And so it's like I don't know what solution to this De'Aaron Fox deal would have made everyone happy. Like, unless somehow the Mavs called us and they're like, "Hey, Luca wants to come over there. You know, he wants to right the wrong that Vladi made so many years ago, and he wants
Right.
to join you guys, but we got to take Fox." It's like aside from that, like we're not going to trade Fox for a 1A because you don't trade 1Bs for 1As, and so you either are going to take a
Unless
worse
you
player and some
unless you have a 1A who wants out and you have other things to attach to that number two.
right,
Like
but the only
okay,
1A, even what 1A wants out? Like what 1A wanted out? Even Luca didn't want out. Apparently, he cried
hmm
when he was traded. Like
right.
nobody, the 1As didn't want out. So
And
like
guys, by
again,
the
you
way,
can like
I want for the fans, like I want to make this clear, and I want this to be a big bullet point in our call in our podcast today. De'Aaron Fox like was not even as good as Damian Lillard. He was not as good as Anthony Davis. He was not as
no.
good as take your pick of like guys you think are all stars but not superstars. He wasn't even that good because those guys made the playoffs. They made the playoffs with less than what the Kings currently have. That's it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but some of those Portland teams that Dame took to the second round were not as talented aside from Dame than the Kings are aside from Fox. That like I
but
just
Dame wanted to be him. Like he
yeah,
wanted to be that guy.
yeah,
And Fox doesn't want to be that guy, as you can
yeah.
see by where he requested to get a trade to.
So again, don't cry like we gave up like we traded Luca. Like don't cry about that, but cry that you were unable to take a good player and turn that into, or excuse me, take like a great player, but not like a superstar, and turn him into like two good players, like or three good players to like fill out your depth issue. Like that's you could use Fox or a player of that caliber to get two or three like solid good players, maybe one of them with like star potential in the future. Like no, you got Zach Levine who's 3 years older, worse, and makes $10 million more.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, for Kings fans, we're not really in a much different spot than we were when we had De'Aaron Fox. Like, we're not a sick team. We weren't a sick
We're
team with
worse.
Fox.
No, I think we're worse because
I
when you
listen.
take an
I
L,
think we might be a couple games worse, but
no,
we're not 10 games worse.
I think they finished under 500 now, and I think when you take an L on a trade
We
like
were
that,
close to finishing under 500 with
no,
Fox.
I
That's my
know,
point.
but
Like,
I think had the Kings said we're not doing anything with Fox, he's going to be here through the rest of the season and just shut that down. That Oklahoma City game would have been a one-off, and they probably would have won like I don't know 44, 45 games, and that would have been it.
I don't know,
I
dude.
think
I think
I think
Fox
the
would have
Kings
went and got
are
surgery immediately. I think if we did not do anything with Fox
um
after the way that it was all going down, I think Fox would have been like, "I'm going to get surgery."
okay. So then you're probably about where you were anyways, but there's a scenario where that doesn't happen. But
Sure.
I think the Kings taking the L on the trade, and like make no mistake, the Kings took an L on this trade. Like they got
Yeah, for sure.
nothing.
For sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
that reinforces the losing culture. And I think, as you know,
correct.
motivationally oriented as Doug Christie is, you are actually going to see less wins than you would have even if Fox opted to get surgery and shut it down for the rest of the year. That's my thesis. It's my theory. There's no alternate universe that we could run a simulation to know that this is
I was
true.
gonna say we'll
But
pick it up at the end of the season and we'll know
yeah.
exactly what happened.
All right, man. I think you got any last words?
No, I'm good, man. I think we covered it.
Oh God, dude. Why did
King,
I come back?
King's Pod is back, baby. King's Pod is
All
back.
right. God bless, dude.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
Yep. Bye.